So hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to have you here with us at the 81st Venice Film Festival. Maybe by way of introduction, you can tell us a bit about the film Pavements. Not an easy one to define, but in your own words, what can audiences expect?
I hope they can expect a music film such as they have never seen before. Pavement, simply put, in my opinion, a one-of-a-kind band. They touch up against many, many artists from the 90s that they toured with, that they were compared to, that they're friends with. But to me, they're different than all of them in indescribable ways. And I felt like a one-of-one band needs a one-of-one movie. The expectation is like, just imagine that they're one of those bands that gets 4 or 5 or 6 movies made about them, a documentary, a concert film, a scripted film. Just imagine that they're that. And imagine that we just took all those movies and edited them together as a way of arriving at the ecstatic truth that emerges when you take a concert film and a scripted film and you put them next to each other and you say, what is the truth of these characters, of these real life people? And then hopefully you say, I've never seen anything like that before.
I think it's a celebration of the band. It's a celebration of the ideas of the band as much as the band itself, because these are just regular guys who came together to make music, and they cared about the music, so we care about the ideas of the music. Those ideas include deeply ironic, wink wink, self-referential, laughing at everything, deeply celebratory, love of music, love of bands, love of the thrill of like going to a record store and finding something that you only heard about, and then you go home and you unwrap it and you're like, I gotta get through this record now. That sort of stuff, all of it being very much cerebral, but there's some other part that hits you emotionally. I think that which comes through, I think, in seeing them in their 50s getting back together and having the most successful tour of their entire career, and their 20-year-old selves mixed with the ideas that Alex brought, the fake biopic, a musical that really, well, it's a fake biopic, but it's a real biopic, and there's a fake musical, but it's a real musical, and a fake museum that's a real museum. Yeah, so we just want it to be, we want you to understand what the band feels like by watching the movie.
And see, it's not your first work in, working in music. The film has Smell, you work with Ghost, working on other music videos. But you kind of take sort of the concept of like a rock film and kind of skewer it and eschew like the normal conventions of that. So how is like your other work kind of in this sphere all fed into this film?
And I guess if you do a few things back-to-back-ish, you kind of need each one to be different in its own way, otherwise it's boring. I like a great many things to listen to watch. Working with Ghost and working with Pavement, like these shouldn't have anything in common. Aesthetically, creatively, the way we talk about them. For me, the only thing these two movies have in common is I've never seen anything like them. And to do that twice in a year is, I think, kind of fun to be able to say that. To me, that's the answer, is like, why represent different kinds of storytelling within the same basic framework as like, not no two bands sound alike, but let's just say no two bands sound alike. Obviously many bands sound alike, but that means you get to find a visual rhythm that matches the scripted fictional characters of Her Smell. You find a visual rhythm and an aesthetic that matches Ghost and what Tobias has created. You find, in collaboration with the world's #1 Pavement fan, an editing rhythm that is hand in hand with what we feel and we hope represents what this band means to their legion of absolutely cultish followers, for whom there is no one Pavement, which is why the movie does not have any one Pavement. It has multiple views on the same subject, because I felt at the time, and now spending a lot of hours with fans of this band at the museum and at the concerts that I attended, there just is no one way to appreciate them. And they defy expectations. There is no two shows that they played for 18 months had the same set list. And that means something. That's something that very few bands could ever even aspire to. And that is the essence of this band to me. And then the question is, what is a movie like that? I mean, the real version would be every time we screen it, it's different to match their nimbleness with the set lists, but that's just who they are. And that means the movie has to find a version in our language of what that means.
What can you say about your collaboration as well, and I guess, taking this genre and turning it inside out. It just feels like it must be a lot of fun to be able to be so playful with the form itself.
First of all, no other record label than Matador Records and no other band than Pavement would let us do that, because even though every single time you work with a band, you hear like, oh, we want you to do your own thing, man. No one actually means that, and this is the only time they've actually meant that, you know? So yeah, the form, playing with the form, there's all kinds of versions of playing with the form, right? Like there's making fun of certain things that we think are silly about most banned fiction films and documentaries, which we hopefully savage them as much as possible. But there's also playing with the form in a sense of trying to, you know, the reason why those are bad is because they take these complex people and this complex idea of what it means to be in a band and create art, and they distill them to the most boring narrative cookie cutter beats. And when you literally have like climactic mudslinging event, which is told through fake archival for a fiction film, mixed with the musical, and then you have the reaction, which is the cheesy, you know, made for Hollywood Oscar bait version, and then you have another version, which is actually they were having fine time, and that footage isn't even actually maybe completely what it's supposed to be. And then that hopefully gets you thinking a lot more about like the creative process, what it means to make art, what it means to be in a band, what it means to be a person. The Pavement fans who've liked the movie have been like, this is really great because I feel like this is what it's like to listen to one of the records or go to the shows. The non-Pavement fans who've liked the movie, I really like how they just say it's about creative process. It's about yourself, and you make that thing by showing multiple versions, and then you kind of get the sense that whatever that authentic version of each of them is, it's somewhere in that kaleidoscope. It's not, no one can know really. And I think that's like fun. It's fun to not have to play by any rules at all in order to get to something deeply real and true.
And maybe it's a kind of understatement, but there's a lot going on in this film, and the fact that you're doing the biopic, the musical, the exhibition. What was the most challenging part of all of that? Was it ever too much, or was it just something that was just part and parcel of the process, so you just took it on?
It was always too much.
Yeah, it was. Those three constructed projects, which were all done, you know, a couple months apart, they presented challenges that I, as a bored filmmaker, found really interesting, albeit incredibly challenging, ranging from fun challenges to aggravating challenges. The museum was probably the most fun, the most solitary work, and then also ultimately the easiest for me personally, because once it was open, I didn't do anything. But the logistics of, basically, we booked a 4-band bill, flew some bands in, structured the logistics of having 4 different bands with 4 different backlines play 3-song sets. For what we paid these bands, and we could have put on a show that lasted 5 hours and we could have charged $200. Instead, we had each one play for 15 minutes. That's a fun challenge, because in movie making, on an independent level, you're never getting the thing you hear about in Mission Impossible, where it's like, we have 6 months to plan this. We're figuring this out from every angle. We're gonna rehearse it. We have one chance to get it right. It's gonna be 2 minutes in the movie. And that's really fun as a filmmaking thing. So to find a micro version of that was kind of thrilling. The biopic is the same. I mean, we have 7 actors in this. The shoot was 6 days. Now this is a 7-person cast that you assemble them, you clear their schedules. You might want to hang on to them for like 6 weeks and make a movie. But instead, we basically had 7 very busy, very in-demand people just swinging in for like 3 days. That's very stupid. But it was really fun as a producer to like sit there trying to make a schedule based on this insane challenge of casting a real movie and only having access to your cast and locations for 6 days. And the musical is very similar. I just was out of my element and happy to be there. And
so many good words here. Stupid, out of your element, nonsensical.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
What a bad idea.
That's what it felt like. No, we were just out of our elements and loving it. I mean, Craig Buda, the film's producer, and I we just love learning new things we can get away with and new things we can learn from and new things that nobody ever learned because nobody ever asked. It's just fascinating logistically. It's incredibly exhausting and tiring.
Which I think speaks to the band. I mean, it's like, it's, you know, the whole time we're just like excited by the ideas that are in the music, eager to do the most extreme version of that, to do that celebration. Like, and I, you know, I think that's what kind of the band is, we started this process with it being like, we don't really want to be involved. Go do your thing, right? I think ultimately they see that we have approached their work in such a multifaceted way that they can now engage with our work in a cool way, which that's awesome. That's what happened at the premiere. You know, multiple members of the band were here, and they were like thinking about it like a movie rather than thinking about, these are people who don't want to do interviews. You know, they were not thinking about it like, oh God, here I am. Ugh. They were thinking about like, whoa, this is a cool movie with cool ideas in it, and that's exactly how we feel when we're listening to their records.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things, and I talked about this with some of the collaborators last night, your question of like, what's the challenge? Like, you have to imagine me talking to the actors in the musical or the actors in the biopic or the band themselves and trying to describe what this movie is going to be. You've seen it now. I've been trying to describe this movie to people for 4 years. And I have people, it's like if you're building a house and like everyone is decorating a different room and you're like, here's what the whole house is going to be like. And they're like, I can't, but I don't even know what the other room, I don't even know what size it is. And it's like, I know, and I just need, I'm going to explain what it's all like, but you can't see any of it. We're doing it a year from now. And that's really like, that just was me trying to say like, trust me, this is all going to make sense. You're going to be featured in the movie like this. This is going to be this thing. And then for me, it becomes like making a meal with like 4 entrees and no appetizers. That would like kill somebody if you did that on Thanksgiving. And that's kind of what this whole process was like. But also I'm asking so many people to help out and just trust that when they pop up in the movie, they're going to be like, what a cool big thing to be in, instead of like, I did all that work and that's how you're using me.
Well, yeah, like Jason, like a good example, you brought up another time about Jason Schwartzman. You're like, oh, he's doing a bit in the movie as this talking head guy. But it's because it's Jason and he's one of the most sincere people we know, it doesn't look like a bit. And then it looks like when he's talking about the band, he is speaking. So he becomes the talking head, as the famous person talking about one of his favorite bands. It was intended as a bit, becomes sincere, and then it becomes a bit again when you put it in different contexts.
Next time you see him as a talking head, he's saying when he looks at pictures of Malcolm as he sees Joe. And now you realize like these interviews cannot be taken literally because these actors are just clearly clowning on the idea of doing your press kit interview while you're shooting your prestige
Much like we're
film.
doing right now.
But, you know, there's a hall of mirrors, and those are tough.
You know, what do you hope people take away? And I think we sort of covered a lot of the ground. You know, there are just so many layers to it. And it's a love letter to the band. So I guess fans of Pavement are going to come to it differently from people who aren't as familiar with their music. But also, you know, kind of a tribute to the creative process.
Yeah, I always kind of pictured like a huge Pavement fan taking their friend who's never heard of the band. And the huge fan is like, this is so ridiculous. I can't believe some of the stuff I'm seeing, some of these in-jokes, some of these absolute fraudulent things that are being presented as fact. And then at the end, their friend's like, oh, that stuff wasn't real? In the reality of this movie, I believe Stephen Malcolm is in an Apple ad because this movie makes me believe in that by the time I see it. And then the diehard fan is like, no. He was like, yeah, as the placard says, it was like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Miles Davis. Like, no, the 4th name on that list is not Stephen Malcolm. But for us, it's like, no, by the time you get there in the movie, the 4th name on that list kind of is Stephen Malcolm.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when I first started listening to Pavement in the 90s, I liked them because they made me feel cool and smart. you know, like Noah Baumbach says, like in the 90s, if you were cool and smart, you talked about Pavement. And I want our movie to make people feel that way too. Oh, you can clue people in. It's a band where like the process of cluing people into what the thing is part of the fun, and maybe the movie can be the same.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congrats on the film, and really enjoy the rest of the time here in Venice.
Oh,
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. Thanks for doing this.